Hello everybody. So this is going to be a quick video over one of the most powerful individual differences involved in aggression. This is one of the most powerful inhibiting forces of aggression, and specifically that is self-control. All right, the ability to inhibit our impulses. All right, self-control is the ability to impair our impulses or inhibit our impulses. Sorry. So, in general, as self-control grows, aggression drops. All right, and so people differ in their baseline levels of self-control. Some people are far more impulsive than others. Some are far more practiced at controlling their behaviors. So, people who exercise a lot or who are on diets successfully, these individuals will have practiced their self-control. People who have been trained in martial arts may have practiced their self-control. People in the military, people who many people may have practiced their self-control for many different reasons. I've just given you a couple examples. But again, as I said, some people are more self-controlled than others. And what we know is that people who have a higher baseline of self-control, they tend to aggress far less than those who are more impulsive. Okay, so in general, more self-control, less aggression. In general, less self-control, or another way to say that is the more impulsive a person is, the more aggressive they'll be. Okay. Now, we also see this relationship play out in things that affect self-control. All right. So, for example, when we reduce a person's ability to control themselves, the chances of aggression go up. For example, presence of alcohol is one good predictor of whether or not people will aggress, or well, specifically not necessarily its presence, but whether or not it's been ingested. Okay, why? Well, one of the parts of the brain that is heavily involved in our self-control, in fact, it's one of the primary areas involved in self-control, is the frontal cortex. And the frontal cortex is responsible for something we call executive function. Now, executive function involves a whole host of things: planning, reasoning, but it's also involved in self-control, inhibiting our impulses. Well, alcohol is a depressant. All right? What that means is that it lowers the brain's level of neural activity. It reduces it. All right, so it basically it basically depresses activity of the brain. Now, your brain has almost, you can think of it like a pre-planned shutdown sequence. All right, basically it shuts down the more higher order parts first and leaves the lower order stuff running as long as it can. All right, the lower order stuff tends to be, stuff that keeps us alive. Well, executive function is one of those higher order things, and so it's one of the first things to go. All right, and so when we ingest alcohol and it begins depressing cortical activity, it depresses the activity in the frontal cortex. Again, as activity in the frontal cortex is related to self-control, we know that as activity in the frontal cortex goes down, our ability to control ourselves goes down. All right, so this is one of the reasons why alcohol, having ingested it, increases aggression. Now, will it increase aggression for everyone? No. Alcohol inhibits your inhibitions. It uninhibits you. So if you have other personality traits or other qualities or react to other situations that might impel you towards aggression, ingesting alcohol is just going to make those forces more powerful because your ability to inhibit yourself will be impaired. But alcohol isn't the only thing that can impair your ability to control yourself. All right, it can also be depleted by having engaged in a lot of self-control. So we know something called the ego depletion effect. Now, over recent years, it's come under some fire with people having difficulty replicating it. But one thing that seems fairly consistent is that when it's there, and it may be a small effect, but when it's there, it's very heavily moderated by fatigue. Now, what that means is that when we're tired, doing one thing, one act of self-control, not eating that piece of cake or forcing ourselves to go to the gym, or when we're already tired, doing something like that, making ourselves do something we don't want to do, or keeping ourselves from doing something we want to do, inhibiting our impulses. All right, when we do that, when we're tired, a subsequent act of self-control gets harder. So, if I wake up and I didn't sleep very well, so I'm already fatigued, I come down and I come down from my bedroom and I think, okay, I'm gonna go for a run. Okay, so I get on my shoes and I go for a run. When I come back, I've just engaged in an act of self-control. All right, I don't like to run. Right? Maybe you do, I don't, but I do it. All right, because I'm trying to keep my weight down. So I've forced myself to do something I didn't want to do. I've engaged in self-control. Well, I'm already tired. And what we know is that when people are tired, acting on when they engage in a single act of control, it creates this effect called an ego depletion effect. Basically, it depletes your ability to control yourself. And so let's say I come in from a run and my wife has just made a small stack of pancakes. Love my wife's pancakes. Well, if I've just controlled myself and let's say I went on a 40-minute run, I just controlled myself for 40 minutes. The whole time I'm keep going, right? So I've just controlled myself for a long time. I'm probably suffering a massive ego depletion effect. My ability to regulate myself will be heavily impaired. So when my wife puts a stack of her delicious pancakes in front of me, right? If I was, to watch my weight, I would have ideally only eaten half of them, right? They're pretty big pancakes. But if my ability to control myself is already depleted, then my ability to keep myself from eating the whole plate of pancakes is going to be much harder. And I'm probably going to eat all of them. All right. Now, people can sometimes be trained, all right, to begin thinking in ways or empathizing with others, doing things to increase the likelihood of their engaging in self-control. And so we call this class of training protocols aggression replacement. And so, by learning to empathize with someone, you may stop and think about, well, okay, were they really trying to be a jerk? Were they really trying to interfere with things? Or was there some other kind of circumstance, right? So you're trying to empathize, right? Or you may act on a certain kind of mindfulness, right? Where you start reflecting on, okay, why am I feeling this way? Is it really because of this? Or might it because of some other situational factor that I woke up with, or that I encountered right after I woke up, right? Both of these are types of aggression replacement. So you feel aggressive impulses and you stop and then you try to consider it from their perspective. That's that empathy route. Or you begin to examine internally, why am I feeling this way? Both of these involve stopping yourself. Both of these involve engaging in self-control. All right. So even when we're trying to train people to be less aggressive, one of the more successful ways of doing that is to get them to basically teaching them a way to engage in greater self-control. Now, this increase in self-control may not be just a way to reduce individuals from being aggressive or individuals' aggression. It may also be responsible for a decline in violence. Now, we often think, in fact, it's almost a truism. You probably can't turn on the news on TV without hearing this. But a lot of people think today is a very violent time. All right, people often think that violence has been getting worse, but it's actually the opposite of what's been the case. All right, so the first time we recognized this was sometime, I believe it was in the 50s or 60s, I don't remember the exact decade, but at the time there was nobody had really looked at the data on violent crime. And so at the time, everybody had this idea that, oh, well, aggression, violence is just getting worse, and it's going to continue to get worse if we don't do something. But there was this fellow by the name of Robert Elias, wrote this book here, The Civilizing Process. He had predicted that he had looked at books of etiquette, all right? You know you know what etiquette is, all right? Etiquette is, how proper behavior in civilized conversation or civilized gatherings, right? Well, books of etiquette are almost a non-entity now, but for a huge chunk of our history, they were kind of guidebooks. They were rules to live by in everyday life. And so Elias looked at these across time and found that people were developing more and more rules, and they were becoming making finer and finer distinctions about ways to not be appropriate ways to act. And so Elias made the argument that humans have been taming themselves, all right? And they've been taming themselves by at least two forces, which we'll come to back in a minute. But basically, Elias made the argument, the prediction, that we've been taming ourselves and becoming less and less and less and less and less violent. And again, at the time, the prevailing notion was that no, we were getting more violent. Even today, the idea is we're getting more violent. But when a massive effort was made to actually look at rates of violent crime from all records available, they found the exact opposite of what most people believed and what most people believe today. They found that, in fact, violence is not increasing, it's decreasing, and has been for centuries, and it continues to do so to this day. In the medieval times, chances of you being killed was almost an order of a magnitude much higher. Many times, it was many times more likely for you to die by violence, all right, for you to get hurt, killed violently than it is today. Even in contradiction to this common notion people have that violence is a woe of society, right? They often think, well, societies are more violent. People are naturally kind and gentle and not harmful. It's a very Rousseauian idea. If you ever want to check out the philosophy, the writings of Rousseau, you'll have a better idea of what I'm talking about. But you don't necessarily need to, because basically what it boils down to is that a lot of people have the idea that society is the reason we're aggressive, and that if you left people to their natural state, they would be far less aggressive. Even that's not bore out by the evidence. People prior to large-scale society like we have today, chances of dying by violence was sometimes as high as 30%. If you look at nomadic groups today, all right, so primitive tribes that they don't have large societies, all right, even among those nomadic tribes, dying by violence, much more likely. The chances of dying by violence today in most countries is less than 1%, all right? It's very unlikely. And so we're taming ourselves. Why? How are we taming ourselves? Well, Elias is the only one who predicted that we were, and he offered two processes by which we were doing this. One, a civilizing, and these two processes composed what he called the civilizing process. The first process is the development of a Leviathan. All right. A Leviathan is a large, centralized, disinterested force capable of enforcing rules. All right. So, and what we see is that across history, as governments and alliances got bigger and bigger and bigger, violence among people got lower and lower and lower, to the point that we're at today, where we have the fewest nation states that we've ever had in our history as a species. Since, well, I can't strike that. I can't say in our history of a species, but in a very long time. And we have the lowest chances of violence ever. All right. Now, why? Well, why is the presence of a Leviathan going to be one of these taming forces? Well, if I know somebody has the ability to punish me for hurting you, then the chances of me hurting you go lower. All right. So the Leviathan doesn't actually necessarily need to be looking over your shoulder, but it needs to be present and have teeth. All right. Otherwise, the Leviathan won't work. The second force in Elias's civilizing process is what he called gentle commerce. This idea that if both of us are are trading with one another, to the point that, you know, I might make, if I'm a farmer, I might make more than my family can eat. Right? Well, what do I do with this excess? Well, I can give you some of it. And, you know, let's say you're a leather worker or a cobbler, so you make shoes, right? Well, you might make shoes for your family, but then you can make more shoes, right? Well, then I can trade some of my food for some shoes. Well, if I'm in this trading relationship with you, I could just kill you and take all your shoes, right? But in the same way, you could kill me and take all my food, right? And ultimately, you then you're stuck in this Hobbesian trap where you have to either keep killing people and taking their stuff, and then you're constantly having to defend, right? But if instead we're entered in this situation where we can both gain from our mutual cooperation, then it sets up a situation, and we can both gain from our mutual cooperation by having a trading system. Then it would make no sense for me to try and hurt you if I wanted to trade with you. All right. If I wanted to trade with you, I want to get on your good side. All right. If you like me, then I'm more likely to get a better deal from you. All right. So trade sets up this situation where people have more of a reason to act nicely to one another, to control themselves. And so one unifying theme for both of these forces in Elias's civilizing process is that both of these forces motivate self-control. All right, you might piss me off, but if I know that somebody's going to come down hard on me, maybe even kill me if I try to kill you, I'm going to have more of a reason to inhibit myself. If I know that pissing you off or hurting you is going to hurt my chances of doing well for myself and my family, then I'm going to be motivated to do well, to be nice to you, to control my violent impulses. Okay, so and again, the civilizing process is thought to happen on the scale of societies, right? So self-control seems to be one of the most important factors in reducing aggression. All right. As I mentioned at the beginning of the lecture, less self-control, greater impulsivity, more aggression. All right. More self-control, less impulsivity, less aggression. And this is true not only necessarily on a person-by-person basis, but as we talked about in our discussion of the civilizing process, this also seems to happen at the scale of society. All right, guys, that's it for this video over the importance of self-control and its role in aggression. As always, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, have a great week, and I'll see you later.